Hey, it's Don, the Auction Professor here. I've got another BOLO today. It's kind of two BOLOs, but it's all in the same category. Again, BOLOs are what counts, knowing as many items as you can know, so that when you go out sourcing, you've got so many items to look for, you're going to find some good stuff, and quantity of them. You can't just go into a store and expect to find 5 or 6 pieces of clothing and making a living on that. Today, we're going to be talking about bottle openers and corkscrews. May sound weird, it may sound strange, but I've sold corkscrews up to $1,000 before. So you can't laugh at that. Obviously, they don't come up that way all the time, but it only takes a couple more a year to make a couple thousand extra bucks. And if you can add a 10, 15 niches in that each makes you $1,000 or more a year, that's an extra $15,000, $20,000 a year you can make just by knowing a few more items. You know, you can help to, source yourself out better that way. So again, it'll help you save time because you'll be looking for more than just one item or more than just a few items at the same spot you're going to already. So again, we're going to talk about corkscrews and bottle openers, and we're going to go over to the screen right now. Okay, so I was going to do corkscrews and bottle openers, but after I got into it, I'm just going to do corkscrews today because bottle openers there's a lot more into bottle openers than corkscrews. For the most part, corkscrews, what you want are the really odd and interesting ones, advertising ones, and figural ones as well, too. Now, this is a really interesting early one. This is from the 1838 period, circa, somewhere in that range. Now, I drink wine, so we have a bunch of corkscrews here, obviously, too. So I can appreciate a lot of these items were for the well-to-do, so there's not a ton of them available. It's not an everyday man that would have had this in 1838. This was probably a fairly expensive one. Usually they come with these boar's head brushes that kind of cleans off it as you take the cork out. And, brushes off the air so nothing falls back into the bottle. It also helps, scrub the cork off if there's any sediment or anything and you want to recork it so, the wine will last a little longer. But this is a perfect example. This is one of probably the highest ones you will see. There are some that are higher than this, which I've personally seen on eBay, but this is probably one of the higher ones. This one went for $5,578. It's just a corkscrew. It's all this thing is made to do. But again, it's old, it's early, it's well made. There's barrel versions, as I said. There's all kinds of different versions of these. And I'm just going to show you just a little gambit of them here. So we're going to move on to the next one here. This next one here is an unusual one. Now, this is it's called a tinder kit. I would say this is most definitely 18th century. A lot of people get this mixed up. 18th century means it's from the 1700s. 19th century means it's from the 1800s. 20th century, 1900s. 21st century is now. So just keep that in mind when you see these or you're trying to date them. 18th century is the 1700s, 1710, 1776. That's the 18th century. Now, this is a little different than most. It does have a corkscrew. This is like a gentleman's piece, like a traveler. It has a kit so he can light stuff. This could be used for like smoking a cigar or smoking tobacco pipe or something along that line at this time. Usually there would have been a little Kindle, or it could have had some actually tobacco or something in it. Who knows on something like this? This is a very, very, very nice example. I have not quite seen one like this. I've seen similar in museums. There's one at in the Washingtons. Let me see, in Mount Vernon. There was one there, and one of the display cases, one like this. And then there was another one that we saw at a fort in the Virginia area. But again, these do show up. There's some military versions of these. They would have been like homemade for an officer or something. But once you get the gist on the carvings, this is all hand engraved by somebody. I mean, this is a handmade piece. Very well made, too, so very neat. That's all hand etched in there and carved and engraved. It's actually is a very unusual, especially for being steel from this time. You can see the flint now. Usually they wrap the flint in something. I've seen it in like a little canvas pack. The other side would have had, either something to start a little fire with, or would have had, tobacco or something along that line. So there's several different areas people would have collected this one. This is a little different, so it's not technically just a corkscrew. This one went for over $10,000. But again, it's a multi-tool thing here. So anyway, let's move on here. Now, I've looked at this area for years now. We found a corkscrew once before, and I want to say it was from Norway, but it was like a character-ish like a sailor as the handle. And his arms were spread out, and that was the part you turned. And I had no clue, on what kind of value it would get. I put it up for like $20 or something, and we sold it for almost $1,000. So, from that point on, I looked for anything that looked like a corkscrew. Now, this type of thing shows up, and people do miss it. They just think it's some junky statuary. It's new, for one thing, so it's newer, but it still went for $3,000. The corkscrew comes out. The head is the holder. Now, I've seen many different kinds of these. It's not an uncommon thing, but it is very rare. So you will run into some, and there's a bunch of different brands and some fake ones of these that are new, made for, I don't know if it's technically made to fool somebody, but they're much newer than this. So anyway. But again, you can see the price, $3,000. I mean, when you sell one of these for $1,000, you're going to be looking for them everywhere. And I do find them, especially since I started looking for them. I ask for them. I have people that look for them for me. There's many avenues to find these. Now, here's an early one, too. This one could be 1700s, somewhere in that range. I'm not sure. Let's go down and see. It's in a book, actually. So, corkscrew by Jacques Perrellet. I'm not sure how that's pronounced. Never took French, but anyway, it's a nice one. $2,000. And again, the more unique, the more like oddball way to open a cork and to remove it from the bottle, the better, it seems. These steel ones are early. It's typical. They had to be made sturdy, so steel is usually the better source. You're not going to find them in brass or anything, especially not bronze, because they will crack. Now, this is a very unusual. I think this is for one like built. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is like a table type one for like a big industrial place, for like a restaurant or something. Well done. It's got a plate on the front. What does it say? Yeah, that's just saying the model. It's a club one. So yeah, I would say this was made for like restaurants or something, like big areas, a wine facility or something. 1864. It's $1,700 and basically $60. So again, I look for these. The odder the better. I really appreciate the technology of the day that goes into these and the workmanship in them. It may just not look like much to some people, but there's an art to these. These were considered almost a work of art by some standards, because it was mostly to the uppity, the well-to-do of the day that could afford these, as I said. So anyway, $1,438, and that's part of why. And this is missing its grip. But anyway, part of the reason why these go for so much money is because there weren't a ton of them around. In 1700, there might only be a couple thousand made in a certain country or state or area or something along that line. Because again, not everybody could afford to get wine, and why would they spend the extra money even on something fancier like this when you can just get a bare bones one? Now, this is like a stand version, too. This is what you would see probably for a restaurant as well. And that bolts it down to a tabletop or something along that line. And you could just do a bunch real quick. You just pop it in and boom, it would pop right out. These are rare, so this didn't go for quite as high as I would have thought, but $923. It's just not very attractive, I guess, is the thing in it. You got to understand some of the collectible fields. The more intricate and unique it is, the better the item usually is. Now, this is what's called a barrel, and I don't know if they have that in here, no, but the middle looks like a barrel is kind of why they call it that. Now, that could be bone. I notice a lot of people don't describe it. Yeah, that does look like bone. But sometimes those are ivory, and you can't sell them on eBay. You don't want to get caught doing it either. Even if you didn't know, you can still get yourself in trouble. This person probably didn't say a word about what it is. Yeah, he just didn't mention anything about it so this person technically could have been in trouble, I would say. But anyway, $1,000 on that one. Anytime it's bone or horn, you have to say what kind of bone it is on eBay. If it's the wrong kind, you can literally be in some trouble there. It could be reported to the local authorities. Yeah, I'm not saying they will, I don't know, but, I know that's an issue. I've watched many shows and seen many, news channels talking about stuff like this. Now, this is another one by the same brand. Now, unfortunately, they don't show the bottom, but this has, again, multiple category niche interest. So it could be in the clowns, the circus, barware, and then there's actually people who just collect corkscrews, believe it or not. They're usually wine aficionados. So, as I said again, I've got quite a few of them. Sirocco, again, it's a name brand. They did other stuff besides just this, too. So anyway, now here's a one you'll probably be able to find. if you look hard enough and long enough. This style, the legs, it's a very common one actually, and people miss it thinking it's newer, especially if they're really shiny and sparkling clean. People might think this is 40s or 50s and not sink much into it, because there are some from that age. They've reproduced this for who knows how many times. Morley and Sons, though, is a known name. So, and I do believe they made, straight razors as well, too, if I'm not mistaken. They were a steel factory, so this is just something you would have gotten. Now, it could have been put together by somebody else, but the actual corkscrew and metal part itself was made by that company. So, this one's $697. Now, this is a very unique one. I'm really surprised it only went for $673. But again, it's not really super fancy, and it's not in the best condition. It would have probably been better if it was shiny to some extent. It has a name and the whole works on it. This is an early patent, and I believe this is a British patent. The low number gives it away on how old this thing is. I would begin to guess 1860s, 70s. I don't see any date on it, but that's my honest guess on it. So anyway. Let's move on here. And again, I will cover bottle openers on a future video, but this one's like its own interesting category, and I was very impressed with some of the ones on here. I look these up once in a while, but I mean, unless you're going to find one, there's no sense in wasting time on certain areas, because I know pretty much the gist on almost any corkscrew opener. You know, I've researched it so many times in the past. So anyway. This one's a pillar version. It's usually looks pretty much similar. It has two pillars on either side of the actual screw part. Early style. Some of these were hand. The screw part was actually hand cut in there on some of them, not machine cut. This is probably a machine cut, 1870s, 80s, maybe even in the 90s. But it needs a little bit of a fixing to it, I would say. Now, something like this, I wouldn't personally clean unless I knew what I was doing. Now, people are probably going to want to clean this up if they're going to use it, but there's two different kinds of collectors. Some people like to use these and show off their fancy collection of corkscrews, and other people like to just have them on the wall or have them as a display piece. So I would never recommend cleaning this unless it was so bad it just wouldn't work or something, because when the threads get jammed up or rusted, they don't usually turn very well. So you might have to do something. If they work and spin and remove a cork, they're much better. They'll always sell higher. This one's $577.85. So, again, we're still hundreds of dollars. Now, this one's one of my favorites. I've seen one. I missed it. Somebody else bought it in front of me, but that's usually the case on some of these oddball ones. There's several times. Now, this one... there's several different kinds of these. This is a very popular one. I believe it's like 1910 or 20, something like that. No date again, but I believe that's the case on these. Again, you'll get to know the construction of them as well too, and the figuralness of them. This is newer than some of the other ones, but anyway, $550. Now, this I always call it knuckle buster. Plume is what I guess the actual name is. Sometimes it's worn, you can't read it, but this reminded me always of the brass knuckles. So anyway, it was an interesting piece, honestly, and that's literally the design I basically get out of this. I think it's missing something in the center, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe there was a brush or something. Let me see here. Practically filling. Clearly marked as this. Yeah, I don't see anything else on it, but I swore there was something in the center of it there, if I'm not mistaken. I've run across one of these before, so they're not huge dollar ones. $542 though is still pretty good for something. You might have to spend $125 to find one of these. That's a reasonable reseller price and something I would probably pay for this, honestly. So anyway, again, it's a good one. It's marked. It's a known one. It's datable by, the registered design mark from the UK on this one, I do believe. Now, here's again, this one's called barrel. The other one was technically barrel, as I said. Now, the other one was bone, but it was missing the bristles, which I didn't even think to call out to you. Some things I just forget to say because I know the item so well, but anyway. You're going to run into one of these. It may be out of your reach, or you may not want to sink the money into it. They might have it too high. But eventually, again, I've run into stuff like this. So, you will see it. And, if you go around enough, you'll run into it at antique stores and stuff. I thought that wasn't a patent shield. That's like the maker's mark design. Patent shield should be on the other side, if I'm not mistaken. But maybe not. Maybe that is it. I don't know every specific, maker. I know most of the basic overall shape. These boar bristle ones are very common. Again, I say common. That's one of the more common ones if you find one of these. I don't care if the bristle's gone or not. It is technically bone, so technically by eBay standards, these folks should be listing that. And some of these, again, could be ivory, so they could be risking themselves. Again, I would always be cautious on that. I bet you they don't even say what it is in here. Sold out of my private collection. No, it doesn't even say. So they're avoiding the fact that it's bone on here. Now, you get caught, you could be, you could get a strike on your account for selling a banned item or something, depending on what it's made out of. If you don't know, technically you're not supposed to sell it. Just FYI. This is one of those touchy areas. I don't usually sell this kind of stuff. We've run into, like tortoiseshell and things like that you just can't sell, so I just don't even mess with it. Even though they're lovely pieces, I would never harm a turtle, truthfully. We've got a tortoise that we've had for years, so anyway, that I actually didn't, we ran over with the lawnmower, didn't even know it was there, a tiny little baby one. But anyway, interesting item, $595. This is the shape that I usually look for. Anything with a barrel. And I don't even if the whole entire brush part was gone, you'd still get $150, $200 for it. Now here's another example. This is an original one again. I believe this one's marked too, but maybe not. They're not all marked. This is probably another, yeah, it's marked there. You can't quite see the whole marking, but it's marked. A lot of people, again, as I said, this one looks much newer because it's in such great condition. Now, I personally think this one was cleaned, it looks like to me, honestly. The metal itself just looks too clean for me to say otherwise. And again, you could go either route. You could clean it or not clean it. And you're cleaning it, you're cutting off a little bit of your market, but for the most part, a lot of people would buy this and use it as an oddity or have it on their bar. And you don't want to rust it up one anyway, but usually I just leave it go. It does seem to sell a little higher, say $50 to $100 minimum, sometimes even more if they're in good condition but not polished up like this. Just because some collectors do want that patina to it. So, and there's a ton. I've seen probably 30 or 40 different varieties of this exact corkscrew opener here, including probably 20 new versions that were made to look like the old ones. And you're usually sellers who you'll buy one there not knowing that it's new, and then you come back the next time and they got another one looking similar to it. So, these people buy them from India or whatever they buy them at, but you got to be so cautious these days. Now, this one I believe was, this is like a chromed process of some sort. Maybe that was celluloid too, but it might be bone. Yeah, it's probably bone. I hate to say it, but that almost looks like ivory, honestly. It's hard to tell. It could be plastic, but I really doubt it. Yeah, that looks like it could be bone or ivory. Again, I would be cautious on these, because you can get yourself in trouble. You'll get some scrupulous person who will turn you in based on what it is. I don't like to sell anything like that's illegal in the first place, but, that's somebody else's call. If something happens to it, it happens to it. I don't sit there and waste all my time trying to report stuff because that's not my persona. I'm for my business, and whatever somebody else does is their own problem. So anyway, at least other sellers like this. I appreciate the item, and I'm glad to be able to see it. But anyway, $99. I'm surprised it went for so little. Maybe it was the way they did it. Maybe it was a buy it now. Don't remember what it was, but it probably was a buy it now would be my guess. A lot of people don't realize the price on some of these, and they put them too low. Again, it's just like any item. Yeah, I do remember this was a buy it now, actually. So you just got to pay attention to it and know that you need to start some items higher. I would have never put this that low, especially marking it as $18.98. I would have let it ride for $400 or $500 and just seen what happened. Maybe even a hair higher. This is a known one, if I remember right, and it's in a book or two, because there's books just on stuff like this. And again, cross-category, cross-niche appeal is the biggest thing, and this is a perfect example. This isn't, I should say, super, super rare, but it's very scarce. I might go into a difference between scarce and rare and, the wrong use of it by the majority of the people out there. I don't put scarce or rare in hardly anything these days, ever, because that's just not the case. Maybe back in the day when we first started on eBay, when eBay, the first couple of years eBay was on, you could get away with doing that. But that's before all the people got into it, and there's so many more sellers, and a lot of the stuff that people were trying to pawn off or that thought was rare back then is not rare at all. Some of the stuff went down in even the last 10 years and went from, say, a $100 item, and now it's $5 or $10 because there's just so many of them on the market, so many people bringing them up. This one will show up if you probably search on eBay. I don't know. I didn't do a search on this one, but there's probably maybe 5 or 6 of these that sold in the last 3 months, honestly. This is a well-known one. This is a Prohibition era one. It's like a propaganda piece as well too. Saying, you're going to die from drinking and stuff like that. It was rather interesting. The typical barrel look and the whole works. This, again, isn't a super, super rare piece, but it's a known piece. It's most definitely a known piece. The corkscrew to plug up the bottle when you're done, or I mean the corkscrew itself, and then you've got the cap, I'm sorry. But it was a two-piece unit kind of thing, so $395. These average from, say, $300 to, say, $560 or so, depending on condition. This one's in fairly good condition, but I've seen much better, honestly. I thought I saw a little mark on him. That's, yeah, you can see on, like, his brow between his two eyebrows, there's a nick there and stuff like that. That is a deciding factor. And down at the base of his collar and stuff too, where the lid probably rubbed across it too. So, and I've seen them with damaged boxes. This one has a little tiny damage to it, and then the other side, the lid, you can see a repair on the lid as well too. The far right over on that spot right there, but you can kind of see it here. It's been taped, so that does affect them somewhat. But again, $395 is still pretty good. Now this one's a fairly easy to find design. It's sterling though, so that's the big deal here. And I believe this is an early 19th century, like 1890s. It's got a decent name on it too. Shriver, I think it is. Shriva. I'm not sure how it's pronounced. I'm bad on pronunciations sometimes, but anyway, that's not the issue. The issue is what it is, how it's made. Now this is an antler. This is totally different. This is like a stag deer antler or something along that line. And it's typical to have, like a two-piece one. Like steak knives are similar to this. They'll have the antler, staghorn antler or something along that line, just like this. You'll see stag in the title sometimes. But the cap there that seals off the end of the antler is sterling, and probably the pipe cover section there is also a sleeve of sterling, and then the rest is steel. Again, this isn't super old, but it's a decent manufacturer. 1910 maybe. It could be 1890s even. Let's see if they say. They probably don't say. A lot of people aren't familiar on the dates on these, but I would say 1890s to say 1920-ish, probably at the very latest. And again, you have to see how they're made. This is like a solid piece screw on this one. Now here's an advertising one. These were given away to like bartenders and things back in like 1910, 20, 30, 40s. Even in the 1890s and stuff, you'll run into a few of these. And if you're not familiar, this is mother of pearl, and this is a typical thing that happens. The mother of pearl wears down much quicker than the metal, obviously. So you can see the A from Anheuser is very nice on the metal part, but as you look at where it was handled, it's rubbed off. Now this would have been engraved into the mother of pearl, and they usually inlaid like a black paint or something into that so you can see the lettering much better. But again, it's all worn off from just common use. The next one here is a non-pearl version where you can see what basically you would have seen in it. And this is a perfect example. It's got wear to it too. The center of the A is worn out completely. And this is typical. You'll see stuff like this. But again, this is a worn down one. You can see it just by looking at it. So it's a pretty interesting one. But again, these sell fairly high, $250. Again, it's an early promo. Again, could go back to the 1890s. Again, no date on these, but there's an Anheuser collectible price guide that actually has a bunch of these in it, so you can look these up. And I'm sure if you Google it, you'd probably find it online too. And just the last one here, this is from the Concorde, which obviously doesn't fly anymore. There was a horrific accident for those of you who don't pay attention, or you weren't around then simply. I paid attention. I was, always fascinated about the Concorde. I'm going to actually touch on just airline collectibles here in the near future because there's so many different ones and different items you can find. But this was $225. It's new. It's sterling. The Concorde line alone has a huge following of collectors. So again, this is a perfect example. So you can get just airline collectors, corkscrew collectors, and then Concorde collectors as well, or even British Airway collectors. So, it has multiple appeal to it. So anyway, that's what I have for you today.
Well, there you go. There's some more items that we look for. It's not something you're always going to find, and you're not always going to find high dollar ones, of course, of anything. So again, but adding more items in will increase your sales. So that's corkscrews and bottle openers, and hopefully that gave you some ideas. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button down below. You can also hit the bell icon to be notified when we post new content or go live. Subscribe and tell a friend.